guys, welcome back to my channel. So, to start off, trigger warning, this is going to be another Scientology video. So if you find those triggering, please do click off this video and go to some of my other content, which is more beauty related, as you can find on the rest of my channel. Anyway guys, as promised in my last video, I went and I hurriedly watched the rest of the buying of a town and got back to you. It's later in the day, but I did get through it. So this is going to be a continuation of the Leah Remini Scientology and the Aftermath season 3. This is episode 10, buying a town part 2, and so I'm going to go ahead and get into that. So this episode covered the death of Lisa McPherson, and that is just such a sad story, and it is such a telling story of what Scientology can do when they really put their minds to messing with people. So I'm just going to go ahead and get into this. This goes back to 1995 and the fuckery that was going on in Clearwater, that is continuing to go on in Clearwater, and why really and truly the FBI and the IRS really need to get off their asses and do something. I am so mad right now. It is just not funny. So let's talk about who Lisa McPherson was, what happened to her, and go from there. So Lisa McPherson was a devout Scientologist. She was a devout Scientologist for 15 years. She was in Clearwater, and around the time of her death in 1995, she had started reconnecting with some of her family and friends, and she had started expressing doubts about her religion and had started talking about coming home. They never stated where home was or any of that. None of her family or friends were on the show. We just know like the background of what was going on. Okay. Around that time, she had a very small accident in downtown Clearwater. Before police and ambulance could arrive, for some reason, she stripped down all of her clothing and started walking down the street naked. So a paramedic grabs her and is like, "What are you doing? Why are you doing this?" And she stated to him, "I need someone to pay attention to me. I need help." So they took her to the nearby Morton Plant Hospital in Clearwater. They checked her in. Within an hour, 10 Scientologists besiege the hospital. They start talking to her and they convince her to leave the hospital against medical advice and whisk her away to the Fort Harrison Hotel, where she was locked into her room for 17 days. Now, during that is what they were doing for that 17 days is what is called a Scientology introspective rundown. So we're going to go into what that's called, what that is. So January 23rd, 1974, L. Ron Hubbard put out the introspection rundown. Excuse me. Says, on a person in a psychotic break, isolate the person wholly and with all attendants completely muzzled, no speech. So what they do is they put a person away and they get a bunch of Scientologists who have no training, no psychological training, no medical training, no nothing. They're just a bunch of people. And they don't speak to the person. The person may be speaking to you, but you act like you don't hear them, you don't speak to them, and they have you locked away in a room. But they keep records for some reason. So they had records going on. So the caregivers took logs every day, and these logs showed that Lisa's condition was getting worse, progressively worse. But we don't have any records of the last 3 days of Lisa McPherson's life because they were ordered to be destroyed. And we know that they were ordered to be destroyed because Marty Rathbun the former Inspector General for Scientology, who has left. He was one of the ones with Mike Rinder who started blowing the whistle on all the abuses of Scientology, stated that he was the one that ordered those records to be destroyed. And I have all of those receipts right here. There's a declaration of Marty Rathburn in 2014. It's a written declaration. It says, "You have acknowledged that you ordered the destruction of documents." He says, "At the behest of David Miscavige, yeah, I forwarded the order to destroy any evidence that might link David Miscavige to the case." Then there's an interview where they show the interview in this episode, and I literally paused, captions on, wrote this word for word. To protect, he said, they asked him why. He said, "To protect the organization." One of them was talking about the witness in the case pleading with the doctor who was on the staff to get Lisa to the doctor. That was like a smoking gun, incriminating in terms of people knowing that she was in deteriorating physical condition. This was from his mouth himself, so they knew this woman needed help. She needed help. And they did nothing to get her any help. So on day 17, even though a hospital was 5 minutes away from Fort Harrison Hotel, they drove her 50 minutes away to a Scientology doctor. That's David Minkoff. By the time that they arrived, Lisa was pronounced dead. So here are some newspaper headlines. December 5th, 1996, Tampa Bay Tribune. Mystery surrounds Scientologist death. December 1st, 1997, New York Times. Death of Scientologist heightens suspicion in Florida town. January 16th, 1997, Tampa Bay Times. State joins inquiry into church death. November 14th, 1998, Church of Scientology charged in members' dehydration death. Now, let me just tell you this. To die of dehydration is one of the most horrific deaths. Like, you die painfully and slowly. So this woman suffered. And they showed some pictures of her hands and feet, and she had these little tiny sores, and that woman suffered. Anyway, so Joan Woods was the medical examiner in Clearwater or Panola County or whatever area at the time. So her original autopsy report dated 12/6 of 1995, manner of death undetermined, immediate cause of death had a couple of things, but it said bed rest and severe dehydration. Scientologists wanted that shit gone because that proved that they had done a criminal act that would have put their tax exempt status in question. That could have cost them millions, billions, whole chunk of change, and David Miscavige just wasn't having that shit. So they ran out and they hired the 3 pathologists that were in the O.J. Simpson trial. Everybody knows them, you know, they're huge names, and they've been in a lot of cases. They're very famous. So they run out and grab them motherfuckers. They bring them down to Clearwater, set them up, and start, I mean, they fair gamed the fuck out of Joan Woods. They're like, you got David Miscavige calling her attorney, like putting pressure on her attorney, like she doesn't have a choice, you know, she's got to do this, and they're questioning her ability to even do her job, and you know, they're just putting so much pressure on this woman. And Scientologists went after this woman so hard and so fast and from all angles that, you know, they've got state prosecutors are trying to get their asses. They've got criminal case pending. The families filed a civil lawsuit, And so they've got all this going on, and they're going after this woman because they're like, if we can get her to change these results, that criminal case is gone. Our tax exempt status is fine. We can bullshit this family. We can settle that, you know, a couple $1 million, whatever. We can get them off our case. We'll be fine. So they pressured Jones so hard that February 16th of 2000, she revised her autopsy report and changed the manner of death to accident, even changed the immediate cause of death. She changed all of that just to get Scientology off of her ass. That completely undermined the state prosecutor. They had to drop the charges. Criminal case just bottomed out. They couldn't do anything. So, Tampa Bay Times, March 7th of 2000 said hired pathologist take church's side. Like, even the papers are just like, whatever. We know that y'all did something, but, you know, okay, fine, whatever. So, though the criminal charges were dropped, the civil case was still filed, and David Miscavige was added as a defendant in that civil case. At first, it was just against the church. But because of all of this other stuff, the family also added David in as a named person. And because he was a named person, the church was doing everything they could to cover David's ass. Well, this brings in another person, Bob Minton. Bob Minton opened what became the Lisa McPherson Trust. And Bob Minton has some balls. Like, this man was a good man. What he did was he opened the Lisa McPherson Trust. He didn't just open the Lisa McPherson Trust. He opened the Lisa McPherson Trust in Clearwater, Florida. He didn't just open the Lisa McPherson Trust. And he didn't just open it in Clearwater, Florida. He opened it in Clearwater, Florida, next door to the Office of Special Affairs, which the Office of Special Affairs is like the hound dogs of Scientology. Like, if you're causing Scientology some problems, it's the Office of Special Affairs that comes after you. Well, the person in charge of Office of Special Affairs during this time is Mike Rinder. So, right now, you have Mike Rinder over Office of Special Affairs, and now you have Bob Minton with the Lisa McPherson Trust right next door. So, Bob Minton is standing up to the Church of Scientology because he has looked into this Lisa McPherson case and he knows that there's a problem and he wants something done about it. He wants Scientology to answer for this. So he is backing this civil lawsuit for this family, and he wants Scientology to pony up and say, yes, we did something wrong, and pay up and just admit they fucked up. That's what he wants. So, David Miscavige sees the Lisa McPherson Trust not only as an insult, but he also sees it as a threat. And so, they start coming at them hard. And so, they show this footage. Like, when they open the Lisa McPherson Trust, they show this footage. Like, there's glass front, where there's Scientologists, like, standing out front, staring into the building. And, like, taunting the people to come out. And, like, anytime that they're, like, coming in or out of the building, they're, like, hollering at them and stuff. Like, just being very confrontational. So, Minton hired some people. They got to work on really kind of just going after Scientology. And so, one day they were doing a peaceful picketing in front of the Fort Harrison Hotel. Had their little signs. They weren't shouting. They weren't doing anything. They were just doing a peaceful protest in front of the Fort Harrison. This guy comes up, runs up, and he's like shoving a camera into Minton's face. Minton kind of bats it away. It kind of hits the dude in the face. Dude's very dramatic. Falls down on the concrete. Everybody like runs, calls the police. Minton gets arrested for battery on this guy, which is just ridiculous to me, but okay, whatever. So, He goes to court over it, and they actually use fair game as their defense. And in the end, Minton is acquitted. So, I mean, like, yes, Clearwater, you do get it. You're understanding. You are still standing up. You do still have a brain. Yes, go you. So, Minton and the rest of the trust continue to do their peaceful protest. They are continuing to fight, and they are continuing to stand up. Scientology, though, go after them, and they are continuing to attack. There is footage of them, like, coming at them and, like, trying to physically attack them. There's even, like, footage, like, they push Bob Minton, and there's footage where they're like, no, make them come at you. So they're trying to, like, Scientologists are trying to make the other protesters attack them so that they can get them arrested. Like, they're trying to provoke them into physical action. So, all of this keeps going on. Scientologists see that their actions aren't provoking them into physical actions, so they go about it another way. They file an injunction. And so they file the injunction, go to a circuit court, and this is where the legal system fails again. The freaking circuit court judge grants the injunction so that the Lisa McPherson Trust and even names, oh, I just lost his name, names Mark Bunker, who is one of the employees of the Lisa McPherson Trust, names him by name, tells them that they can't go within 10 feet of any Scientologist, names a bunch of Scientology buildings, but it's the Pinellas County Circuit Court permanent injunction. It was filed in 1999. It was granted in 1999. It says the defendants are permanently enjoined from coming within 10 feet of any member of the church. It names Mark Bunker by name. It names a bunch of buildings. Okay, now, this is in 1999, right? So, they won. Scientology won. This was a huge, huge defeat for Clearwater. And it was a huge win for Scientology. Scientology got their way. So, Scientology started hiring off-duty Clearwater police officers to protect their building from these savages of the Lisa McPherson Trust. They started making the Lisa McPherson Trust people look like troublemakers, and like they're always, you know, being so just outlandish with their behaviors, and they're from out of town and blah, 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 blah. And so they were turning the PD against the McPherson Trust. So in 2000, Mark Bunker documented Scientology's use of the off-duty Clearwater Police Department to show how they were using the police department against the McPherson Trust. In doing so, he documented how they were being videotaped by the Office of Special Affairs. He was showing how they were being followed by the private investigators. They were talking about how they were being assaulted while they were trying to peacefully protest. All of this, and also proving how the police department was doing nothing to protect them or to help them or to take their reports or do anything like a police department should. Now, this gets under my skin because I do work for a police department. I do work very closely with police officers, and I know how my guys would act and what my guys would do. And so that does get under my skin a lot. Like, a lot. But anyway, I digress. So, this goes on for a little while longer because the Lisa McPherson Trust does get disbanded. And we're going to talk about the destruction of the Lisa McPherson Trust now because Mike Rinder is the reason why the Lisa McPherson Trust gets taken down. So, 11/2 of 2009, Tampa Bay Times, how Scientology got Bob Minton. So, Scientology spared no expense investigating Bob Minton with particular interest in how he made his money. Now, Bob Minton was an investment banker. He did a lot with Nigerian bonds. So they sent Dave LeBeau, who is a Scientology PI, to London to speak with the Nigerian officials, and he convinced the Nigerian officials that Bob Minton scammed them out of tens of millions of dollars. So the Nigerian officials go to Switzerland because Bob Minton had all of his money in Swiss bank accounts. So they go to Switzerland. They convince the prosecutor to open an investigation and froze Bob Minton's money. So that effectively ended the trust right there, because Bob Minton was the one that was funding the trust. So when you freeze his money and he has no money to pay any bills, you ended the trust. But I digress. With everything that was going on, Bob and his wife Stacy decide to try to negotiate a truce with Scientology. So they call Mike and ask for a sit down. David Miscavige tells Mike to take Monique Yingling, which is a Scientology attorney, with him to the sit down. So they go and they meet at the Johnson Pope law offices. They sit down to talk, and Bob Minton is just like, look, I'm done. Free up my money. I will get out of here. Now, when I say I'll get out of here, Bob Minton had no ties to Clearwater. None. He had no relatives in Clearwater. He was not from Clearwater. He had no ties to Scientology. Nothing. He saw this case of Lisa McPherson, and he saw how this woman was essentially murdered, and he wanted to help. And being a good person, he tried to come and help. And he saw how this cult had besieged a small town and wanted to help. He was being a good person. He had a big heart. And so this cult saw that a person had a big heart and wanted to help, and decided to essentially try to kill him. Anyway, so with that being said, they decided, okay, fine, we will do that. So the Office of Special Affairs achieved their goal. They ended the threat of Bob Minton. So in 2001, the Lisa McPherson Trust folded. Bob Minton handed the keys and the deed over to the building to Mike Rinder, and that was that for that. Lisa McPherson's family settled the lawsuit with Scientology in 2004. The terms of that settlement are confidential, so we don't know what those terms are. Of course, Scientology doesn't want that information getting out. And after all of this is done, Bob and Stacy go off to Zurich to collect his money, and Stacy ends up calling Mike from Zurich while Mike is still over the Office of Special Affairs, because Bob is threatening suicide and is threatening to jump out of his hotel room because all of this stuff has driven this man crazy. Mike ends up spending 2 hours on the phone with him to talk him out of suicide, and ends up bonding with Bob. And he ends up having many more conversations with Bob over the time period. Bob ends up moving to Ireland. Mike had planned on going and seeing him. Mike ends up planning on going to see Bob, and Bob's like, no, I don't want the private investigators to come. And he kind of freaked out a little bit, and then Bob ended up dying, and Mike never actually got to go and sit down and have a one-on-one talk with him. But Mike did get to apologize to him for the fair gaming that he did on him and Stacy. He still speaks to Stacy to this day, and he did get to apologize. Stacy does not get to take part in this program or gets to speak out about what happened to her or Bob, because everything that happened with the settlement so that they could get the money released was all a non-disclosure agreement, so Stacy can't speak out about anything that happened, but Mike got to tell their story, so at least he got to say what he could about that. And so then at the end of this, we go into downtown Clearwater with Lisa, Mike, and Mark. Now, Mark has this injunction against him from 1999. So they go to a park that's owned by Scientology. And they're sitting there talking. And as they're sitting there talking, you see a couple of officers off to the side. Then you see another officer drive by. Then you see another officer turn right next to them. And then you see the officers walk up. Now, as they're talking, you see off to the side a car is taking pictures of them. People are driving by. They're yelling out the window, "We love your show. Keep going. Keep doing it." And the officers walk up and start talking to them. Now, Mark is not violating that injunction at all. He is not in front of any of the buildings that are in that injunction. The Church of Scientology did not own that park at the time that that injunction was filed. He is not around any active Scientologists. So he is not violating that injunction at all. So Scientology had no right calling the police, and at that point in time, they actually were committing a crime by calling the police. That is a false report. Anyway, I'm going to go back to the story. So, they're standing around talking. Then the officer says something about, well, they can ask you to leave. And Mark says, but nobody's asked us to. So they step out onto the public sidewalk. They're no longer on the private Scientology park, even though there's a gigantic sign that says it's open to anyone. So then they step out onto the public sidewalk. And they wait for an hour for a Scientology official to come so that they can issue a trespassing warning to Mark so that he knows not to come back to that park again. Scientology official never comes to issue that trespassing warning, which now they have effectively misused police force by calling and then never actually going through with what they wanted to go through with. So, where's the repercussions for Scientology in that Clearwater Police Department? That's what I would like to know. Now, here's my other question. That injunction is 20 years old. It is also based off of a trust that is no longer a trust. That trust folded 18 years ago. So why are we still bantering around this trust? And when I say bantering around this trust, they have that thing packaged up so damn pretty, it's unreal. Like, I mean, they have that sumbitch laminated. They've got, maps in it. It's got a nice little cover on it, the whole 9 yards. Like, primo 20-year-old injunction type thing. So why are we bantering around a 20-year-old injunction on a man that lives in that town? They have used that injunction so many times on that man. They literally tried to get him kicked out of his own damn condo because his neighbor was a fucking Scientologist. When is enough a fucking enough, Scientology? When is enough enough? The man can't even go into his own downtown of his own city that he lives in. You try to get him kicked out of his own condo. He can't even visit a park in his own city because y'all want to own all of the parks. If something's going on in his city, he can't even do it. He went to an event and he steps outside on the parking outside of the event. And a Scientologist is out there screaming, 10 feet, 10 feet. and you have an officer telling him he can't walk out across the street because that's illegal, because that's jaywalking. He can't walk down the street while she's still standing outside, because then he's violating the injunction. What's the man supposed to do? Fucking levitate? Y'all are using this injunction as a way to torture somebody over an injunction that should have never been granted. Also, the injunction should be invalidated now since the trust folded up. What is he going to be, like 90 years old, and y'all are still going to be going, we got an injunction, we got an injunction. What's going to happen if he has to go to the freaking hospital and he's in the emergency room and the person in the bed next to him is a Scientologist? He doesn't get treated because the bedmate's a fucking Scientologist? I mean, get real. Anyway, sorry I went off on a rant at the end of that, but so I have one more episode to catch up on, guys, and then I've got a whole slew of articles I need to read through so I can get another news articles from Scientologist perspective out for you guys. I am going to get another Scientology from Scientologist perspective out for you guys too. So if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, leave them down in the comment section down below. Also, in the description box is all of my social media, so I'm on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. If you have anything that you want to share, or if you have anything you want me to talk about, come find me, let me know. And if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, come on, bring them to me. And if you have anything you want me to talk about, send it my way. I'm always open for some suggestions on some crazy Scientology shit. So that's going to be all for this video, guys. I will see you on the next one. Bye for now.